Hello, hello! Welcome back to Brenda's Books. Thank you so much for coming back to listen to more of Blemished Beauty. If you would like to follow Brenda's Books online, I am on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. This is episode 9, and today we are going to be reading chapter 11 from Blemished Beauty. Here we go. Chapter 11, Acne Girl. January 21st, 2016. Dear Journal, I'm in Tom's workshop right now. I like watching him work. After the traumatic Wolverine experience, we decided to stay indoors for the next couple of days. Tom still goes on his daily hunts, of course. However, he has started going on early hunts and making it back in time for breakfast. So now I rarely have a moment away from him. Not that I mind. He is absolutely perfect. It literally hurts when I think of how much I like him. It seems the more I try not to have feelings for him, the more my heart betrays me. I tried to avoid him almost entirely after the Wolverine incident. My face was already repulsive enough without the deep scratch that stretched the length of it. Fortunately, it is almost healed now. He has always found a reason for us to be together, though. He has never looked at me with disgust. I haven't allowed him to be affectionate with me since the accident. I know he doesn't mean it the way I want him to. Journal writing again? Tom asked. Daphne looked up from her notebook. Yes. What are you making there? It's a disc, Tom replied. Oh, may I see it? Asked Daphne as she uncrossed her legs and walked towards the table where Tom was working. Tom took a step back, allowing Daphne to take a closer look. Daphne examined the thick but smooth pine board. The edges are perfectly round. How do you do that? She asked, turning around to face Tom. He shrugged, but his eyes glowed with appreciation. This is an incredibly marketable skill you have, Tom. Have you ever considered being a carpenter? Daphne inquired. What, I'm not worthwhile as a hunter? Tom asked as he wiped the sawdust from his hands. No, that's not what I meant at all, Daphne countered, feeling her cheeks get hot. I only meant, I'm kidding, Daphne, Tom said with a half-smile. He looked down at his hands. I have thought about it. I just took this hunting job to get back on my feet again. Daphne sensed she had hit a sore spot with him, but she didn't know what, and didn't dare ask. Well, you have to be really smart to be an expert hunter from what I hear. My uncle tried to explain to me once about the strategies. Daphne would have continued, but she noticed Tom was smirking at her. What? Tom chuckled. You're trying to make me feel better. I'm not smart the way you are anyhow, he said with a wink. Daphne felt herself blushing. Oh, my lands. How does he do that? Tom fought back a smile. You're an art major, I assume? He asked, throwing a towel over his shoulder. No, sports science, Daphne replied. Really? What made you choose that over art? Well, athletics really changed me. I'd love to help others go through the same process. How did it change you? Tom asked, giving her a speculative look. Well, it gave me some confidence once I discovered I have a knack for persistence, Daphne explained. Ah, I see, said Tom, nodding. He got a cunning look on his face. Did it give you strength? Of course, said Daphne, looking back at him curiously. How about an arm wrestle then? Tom challenged. Daphne laughed. Will that build some confidence in you? To beat a girl in an arm wrestle? Tom shrugged. I just want to see what you're made of. Daphne thought for a moment. How about a leg wrestle? She countered. Tom looked at her suspiciously. Done. Let's do it. But downstairs where carpet is under us. Daphne was nervous and excited all at once for this little match. Once they reached the front sitting room, Tom turned around to face her with a brilliant smile. You sure you can beat me, Coach? He asked with a sly twinkle in his eye. Bring it on, cowboy, Daphne exclaimed with a grin. Tom lay down on the carpet on his back. Does my accent bother you? He asked. Of course not, said Daphne. Actually, I kind of like it. Tom curved one side of his mouth up. Good. Some people don't. Like who? Daphne wondered, sitting down next to him. Tom shrugged his shoulders against the floor. Tanya. Your ex-fiancé didn't like your accent? Daphne asked, dismayed. Never mind, Tom dismissed. Let's get this match rolling. Daphne scooted herself over so her hip was next to Tom's, her feet next to his head. Both of them lifted their inside legs straight up into the air so their ankles crossed. Okay, on the count of 3, said Daphne. 1, 2, 3. Immediately, Tom lost the latch with Daphne's ankle and went somersaulting backwards over his head. No way! Tom exclaimed. Daphne laughed out loud and clapped her hands. We're doing that again, said Tom, crawling back to his place. Whatever you say, agreed Daphne, still laughing. They hooked ankles again. I'm counting this time, said Tom. Almost on the moment he said 3, Daphne had him flipping over his head again. Now Daphne was laughing even harder with her shoulders shaking on the carpet floor. She tried to stop once she saw Tom's face was almost as red as his hair, but her chuckles still escaped her. Tom crawled over to her again so he was sitting close to her face. He had one knee up with his elbow resting on it. How do you do that? No way those skinny legs of yours can be stronger than mine. Daphne laughed again. It's all about thrust and timing, she explained. One more time, he said, raising a finger. Okay, Daphne agreed. This time, Tom pushed at just the right instant, and Daphne's leg bent backwards until her ankle was almost on the floor behind her head. She saw Tom lift his head. Did I win? He asked. Nope, Daphne called. You have to flip me. But how do I? Tom's eyes swelled in dismay. Good night, you're flexible. Daphne smiled. That's why you won't flip me. Tom frowned and lifted his leg off Daphne's, and they both sat up. Are you a gymnast too? Tom wondered, his eyes wide. Daphne shrugged, trying not to look smug. When I was 7, she said. What about you? Do you like sports? And now you're saying hunting isn't a sport. No, Daphne, I'm kidding. Tom laughed as he placed a hand on her leg, smiling hugely. Daphne had no choice but to blush like a tomato. I played on the hockey team for Brocksville University, actually. You were on the university team? Daphne exclaimed, suddenly excited. Why haven't you told me that before? Tom shrugged. What year did you graduate? Tom grimaced, looking ashamed. I didn't. Daphne stared at him in silence. I lost my scholarship my junior year and I quit. You quit the team or you quit school? Both. Why? Daphne asked hesitantly. Tom shrugged again. Not my thing, I guess. Daphne raised her eyebrows as if to question him. Tom, when we played the dice game, you created formulas to figure out every possible scenario, and you did it for fun. How can you say school isn't your thing? Tom smiled at that. Math is the only thing I can do. Daphne laughed once. That's the only thing I can't do, she confessed. Aha! I knew you had a weakness somewhere, said Tom with a half smile and a teasing glint in his eye. I'm happy to know it. He was resting his elbow on his knee again. Daphne scooted over to him and crossed her legs. Are you happy with that decision, Tom? Did you come here to just get away from all the people? Tom laughed once without humor. No, I actually hate being alone out here, he confided. Well, you're not alone now, Daphne noted. I know, said Tom with a slowly fading smile. Chills ran down Daphne's spine at Tom's gentle gaze. I don't know what I'd do without you, Daphne. Daphne just stared back at him. It was times like this that she dared to hope Tom had feelings for her. It was the same way she had felt when he had coaxed her to snuggle up to his chest on the couch. Daphne frowned and shook her head and looked down at the ground. She was sure he cared about her, but not the way she wanted. It was impossible. Why are you shaking your head? Tom asked. It's nothing. Daphne dismissed the question, waving her concern away. Tom put one finger under her chin to lift her gaze to his. It's not Nothing. What is it? Daphne forced a smile. Really, Tom? Tom reached for her hand and put it in his. Why won't you tell me? Slowly, Daphne pulled her hand away and tucked it safely into her lap. She was tired of him playing with her. Maybe he didn't realize what he was doing, but it still wasn't nice. Tom grimaced and looked away. Daphne, are you... He took a deep breath. Am I what? Daphne prodded. He turned to look at her again. Are you not happy here with me? Daphne raised her eyebrows, surprised at his question. Well, of course I am, but... But what? I love your company, Tom, she told him. But the longer I stay here, the more I feel indebted to you. Tom sighed heavily. Daphne, how many times do I have to tell you that you're not indebted to me? At all. I want you here, Daphne. I want you here with me. Daphne felt her cheeks get red as her heart started to sing and ignite hope within her. Almost immediately, she felt angry. No handsome man would want an acne girl. Why is he doing this to me? So a poor, ugly girl like me will fall for him? What exactly do you mean by that, Tom? Daphne asked, her voice getting sterner. If you're so lonely, then anybody would do, right? Tom was a little taken aback by her sudden sharpness. Well, sure, that's how I felt at first, but now that I know you, I want it to be you. Tom swallowed hard, looking uncomfortable. Daphne sighed heavily. Her heart was racing with two very strong opposite emotions. Hope in the truth of his words, and anger at his deviousness. She felt his eyes on her as she battled inside herself. Daphne, will you please tell me what's wrong? Tom asked her, shifting uncomfortably in place. Usually you're so cheerful and easygoing. Did I say something wrong? Daphne lifted her head sharply to look at him. Yes, you're lying to me. What do you mean? Tom asked, looking shocked. I have never lied to you. You just did, Daphne protested, trying to keep her voice calm. She could feel angry tears threatening to spill over. She blinked rapidly, trying to push them back, but one escaped. Tom reached up to wipe it away, but Daphne moved her face away, dodging his hand. What do you think I lied about? He asked. Let's set it straight. Every time you put your arm around me or say you want to be with me, you're lying. You know it's sending me the wrong message, but you're doing it anyway. It's so mean, Daphne said. The truth of her words cut her soul. Daphne didn't look up to meet Tom's eyes, but she could hear in his voice he sounded surprised. Why does he have to be such a good actor? Daphne, I might make a mistake like that once, but do you think I would do it over and over if it didn't mean anything to me? I guess, Daphne sniffed, because that is what you've done. Tom sighed heavily. I don't believe this. You think I've been playing you? Do you really think I'm that kind of a person? Daphne shrugged. If the shoe fits. Tom exhaled sharply and stood up, turning away from her with his hands on his hips. I'm glad to know you think so much of me, he said bitterly. Daphne stood too. Oh, don't make yourself into a martyr, Tom. She rubbed her forehead. I'm going to bed, she huffed, turning around and heading down the hallway. Come on, Daphne. What's the real reason for this? Daphne spun around to see Tom standing in the same spot, looking right at her. The pained look on his face sent a pained feeling through her chest. Why won't you believe me? Daphne felt like crying again, so she bit her lip to stop herself. Tom began walking slowly towards her. Daphne forced her tone to stay steady. Because guys like girls they are attracted to, Tom. Everyone knows that. Tom pulled his eyebrows together in confusion. So? And then he lifted his head as if a new thought had just occurred to him. You think that's not the case with me? Why not, Daphne? He was still inching toward her. Daphne sighed. Are you really going to make me say the words, Tom? I'm not pretty, that's why. She forced herself to look him in the eye. He stopped in place and folded his arms across his chest. Says who? Daphne exhaled angrily and tossed her head back to look at the ceiling. Says everyone, Tom. Tom kept his stance but leaned against the wall beside him. Really? Who said that to you, Daphne? Daphne felt completely frazzled and exposed, and more tears kept spilling over despite all her efforts to keep them in. I don't know. Nobody has really said those exact words, but I can just tell, okay? Tom didn't take his eyes off her, and it unnerved Daphne to the very core. You told me 2 guys have kissed you, right, Daphne? Daphne threw her hands up in the air. What does that have to do with anything? She asked, exasperated. Were they attracted to you? Tom asked. Daphne hesitated a moment. You knew they were, right? Believe it or not, Tom, I might have been rather pretty at one point, but pretending to be attracted to me now is so ridiculous and insulting, Daphne shouted. Tom shifted in his place a minute, unruffled by Daphne's reaction. You used to be prettier? He asked, still staring at her. Daphne glared at him. I can't believe you are still making me talk about the most mortifying thing in my life, she exclaimed, her voice rising with every word. Yes, I haven't always been a pizza face. Tom's head jolted back a bit as his eyes widened, and then his whole expression softened. It's not as bad as you probably think, Daphne, he said gently. Besides, I like your rosy cheeks. Daphne was crying openly now. Ugh! Will you please stop pretending to like me? She sobbed. Makes everything so much worse. Tom gazed at her another moment and then enclosed the space between them with one big step. He wrapped his arms around her, but she swiftly escaped his embrace. Please stop, Tom, she cried. Tom put his hands on her shoulders and ducked down to look right into her eyes. But Daphne couldn't bear to look back at him. She struggled to free herself, but Tom held her fast. I'm not pretending, Daphne, Tom promised. I couldn't do that. Daphne continued to cry, but she didn't pull away. You are a beautiful person, Daphne, whispered Tom. Now she could pull away. Stop it, Tom! Just stop it! After a forceful release, she ran down the hallway to her bedroom and locked the door behind her. And that concludes Chapter 11. I love that one. I love the drama. So great. Hope you liked it too. I hope you come back next week for Chapter 12, which is First Impressions. We finally get some more people in the cabin in this one, and it's a lot of fun. If you want to find out more about Brenda's books, you can visit brendasbooks.net. Until next time, take care.